Hello, I'm Dan Oren of Friends of Jewish Heritage in Poland. I am delighted to welcome you to a presentation by Krzysztof Bielawski on the topic of the destruction of Jewish cemeteries in Poland. This is sponsored by the Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland, FODŻ, and Friends of Jewish Heritage in Poland. Friends of Jewish Heritage in Poland was founded in 2016 as a partner of FODŻ. We are a US-based 501c3 nonprofit organization set up to help provide a pathway for people to work and donate towards restoring ancestral Jewish cemeteries in Poland. You can contribute to our work, and everything that we do and FODŻ does costs money, to jewishheritagepoland.org/donate. FODŻ was founded in 2002, the Foundation for Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland. It is a collaborative initiative between the Union of Jewish Communities in Poland and the World Jewish Restitution Organization. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Piotr Pukta, Director General of FODŻ, the Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland. Piotr?
Thank you, Dan. It is for me a true pleasure and honor to be together with you and to introduce Krzysztof, a true friend and associate in FODZ's office in Warsaw. I don't know if all of you know Krzysztof, so I would like to introduce him first. Krzysztof is a project coordinator at the office of FODZ in Warsaw, and he is also a historian and researcher on the preservation of Jewish cemeteries in Poland. Krzysztof graduated on Jewish studies at the Warsaw University, and he is currently a PhD student on his dissertation is dealing with protection and preservation of Jewish cemeteries in Poland after 1944. In 2005, Krzysztof inaugurated a website dealing with Jewish cemeteries in Poland, presenting not only history, but also present state of those cemeteries that are now to be identified in the landscape. Krzysztof is also author of 2 books and various articles on Jewish cemeteries. He is also author of several articles on Jewish tradition and the Jewish life in Poland after 1944. I know Krzysztof for many years, and we became friends already several years ago. Since May of 2024, he is with FODZ team, and he is a very valuable member of the team. I would like Krzysztof now to present his presentation to the participants of the meeting today.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I really appreciate cooperation with you and, of course, with Dan Oren and Friends of Jewish Heritage in Poland. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are now. Ladies and gentlemen, in Poland, we have approximately 1,200 Jewish cemeteries, and in fact, all these sites are less or more destroyed, in many cases without any signs showing these are burial places. I started researching Jewish cemeteries 20 years ago When I was looking for information on various cemeteries, in most cases I could find the following information. The cemetery was destroyed by the Germans during the war. But I quickly realized that the truth is much more complicated, and these cemeteries have been devastated not by the Germans only, but also by many Poles and the post-war Polish state. 4 years ago, actually 5 years ago, I published a Polish written book, Zagłada Cmentarzy Żydowskich, which means the show of Jewish cemeteries. And it took almost 4 years to publish the book in the USA in Boston, which took place in October last year. So the book is now available in English, and I will tell you in a nutshell what the book is about. Of course, the book is quite detailed, but of course, due to limited time, I will tell you about the most important facts only. But let's start from sharing my presentation. Just a second. Okay, as you know, Poland's state borders change many times. After the Second World War, Poland lost its eastern territory, today parts of Belarus, Ukraine, and Lithuania. Moreover, Poland annexed a part of Germany. Therefore, let me start from these areas of Poland, which before the Second World War were territory of Germany. Of course, we know that the local Jewish communities had suffered repression as early as from the 1920s due to growing anti-Semitism and activity of Nazi organizations. We know various cases of Jewish cemeteries being devastated. However, it was not very common. After 1933, when Hitler came to power, such acts of destruction also took place. For instance, during the so-called Night of Broken Glass in November 1938, very often one can find information that all or almost all Jewish cemeteries were desecrated on that night. I mean the Kristallnacht, so-called Kristallnacht. Although in reality, the actions of Nazi militants consisted primarily on physical aggressions against people, against Jews, depriving Jews of their freedom, and of course the plunder and destruction of apartments, shops, and synagogues. However, in fact, not so many Jewish cemeteries were devastated on the so-called Kristallnacht. In 1939, the Nazi authorities established the Association of Jews in Germany, an association that the Jews remaining in Germany were compelled to join. The previously existing Jewish communities, I mean Kehilot and other Jewish organizations, were made illegal, and all their properties, including cemeteries, were taken over by the new association. The security police, so-called Gestapo, forced the Association of Jews in Germany to sell these their cemeteries. Among various buyers were the town or municipal councils, stonemasons, and of course private individuals, businessmen. But it is worth noting that according to purchase agreements, the graves should be left undisturbed from 30 to 40 years, dating from the the most recent burial. And these agreements guaranteed relatives of those buried there the right to visit the cemetery. However, gravestones were treated as property which could be sold. It also concerned, for example, pre-funeral homes. In 1943, the Association of Jews in Germany was dissolved, and all its property was seized by the secret state police, Gestapo. Tax offices were entrusted with responsibility of selling this property off. This process, however, was beset by a significant legal flaw, because seizure of property did not mean ownership. In such a situation, the German administrative authorities had only the right to be an user, not the owner. This gave rise to numerous doubts and fears among both those who offered the cemeteries for sale and, of course, the buyers. So these formal requirements, these legal problems, and long-lasting negotiations resulted in long drawn-out proceedings. To the end of the war, German officials were unable to develop uniform rules for dealing with Jewish cemeteries in the Third Reich. On the other hand, local municipalities, municipal offices demanded the liquidation of these cemeteries, while on the other, the authorities required compliance with the pre-war law on cemeteries, which for sanitary reasons forbade the disturbance of graves for 30 or 40 years after the last burial. And also they had to ensure a separate burial place for the last Jews living in a town. So due to the lack of consistent regulations, along with a time-consuming procedure for the sale of plots, many Jewish cemeteries in Germany, later Western and Northern Poland, survived the war in a quite good condition. I visited many Jewish cemeteries in Poland and in other countries, and trust me, the best preserved cemetery which I have ever seen is the cemetery in Berlin. It was only devastated a little bit in April 1945 when a few Soviet bombs hit the cemetery. So as you see, the cemetery, which was in the capital, the Third Reich, survived without almost no damage. But in the case of cemeteries in the territory of Poland occupied by Germany in 1939, the fate awaiting them was much worse. Cemeteries in Poland were afforded practically no protection. The Germans destroyed them ruthlessly. In contrast to cemeteries in Germany, cemetery plots in Poland were not subject to sale, but there are known cases of gravestones being sold. During the first days or weeks of the war, Wehrmacht soldiers were already devastating, desecrating Jewish cemeteries. It can be assumed that the devastation of cemeteries in the early weeks of the war was a part of repressions committed against Jews by soldiers of the German army who were brought up on anti-Semitic ideology. The smashing of Matzevot and profanation of graves, along with other things such as violence, desecration of synagogues, burning of religious books, was above all one of many actions aimed at humiliating Jews. But in time, this destruction became to a more planned process connected to the Nazi management, if you can say so, of cemetery property in the form of stone and other material. The Germans used the gravestones on a massive scale to harden roads and pavements as curbs and as building material. They used Jewish forced laborers, prisoners of war of various nationalities, for example, British and Soviet prisoners, and local populations to carry out the actual work of devastating cemeteries. Of course, for Jews, this was an additional, extremely painful form of repression. The Germans not only used their labor, but at the same time severely humiliated them, ordering them to dig up graves, destroy the gravestones of family and community members, and to use matzevot for various construction works. Among the most drastic cases of such destruction was the establishment of the forced labor camp in Plaszow in 1942, later transformed into a concentration camp. This camp was located on the site of two Jewish cemeteries in southern Krakow. After the ghetto was closed, one of these cemeteries became the only official burial place for local Jews. Prisoners of Plaszow were mainly Jews from Krakow, southern Poland, of course, Slovakia, and Hungary. They had to live on graves. They were also forced for construction work. Gravestones were torn out of the ground and used for construction work and for hardening the camps, roads, and the barracks and villas inhabited by the Germans. The camps buildings were located directly over graves, and during construction works, the unearthing of bones and human remains were a regular occurrence. The building of Hevra Kadisha was used as a prison and torture chamber. Two pre-funeral homes were converted into a stable and a pigsty, as well as a bathhouse and delusing station. I will quote a part of prisoner Mathis Brunegraber's testimony, who recalled the work on constructing the camp. So after the war, he said, "We demolished the cemetery wall, which took a long time. We had to break up gravestones with pickaxes. The graves themselves were leveled and piles were driven into soil to provide foundation support for the barracks. These piles were driven into a depth of 1 meter. A mechanical excavator dug up the soil, unearthing skeletons. Whenever a skull was encountered, the German guard ordered us to remove any gold teeth and took them away. In June 1944, the Germans blew up a pre-funeral home. You see this photo now. Moreover, some Jewish cemeteries were devastated as a result of military operations, both by the German and the Polish army, probably also by of course, also by the Soviet army too. Cemeteries were often destroyed as a result of executions. The digging of mass graves also contributed to destruction, including the excavation of aerial burials. And what is obvious and has consequences until today is the genocide of about 90% of all Jews living in Poland. In this way, Jewish cemeteries were deprived of their natural guardians. And consequences of this we experience until today. However, Jewish cemeteries were not devastated solely by the Germans or on their orders. Many local residents, first of all Poles, but also Germans, German civilians and Ukrainians, also participated in this process. During the war, those cemeteries that were usually located some distance from the ghettos and were most unattended and easily plundered. Virtually anything of any value fell prey to local inhabitants. Gravestones were torn and removed. Walls and buildings such as pre-funeral homes and ochelim of rabbanim were demolished, and trees were cut down. The materials were used for construction works, hardening courtyards, as grinding wheels, or as gravestone in Christian cemeteries. You see now a photo taken in a small village of Starowola, which is very close to Parysów. I visited this village, I think it was 2010. Someone told me that there is a cowshed built using matzevot, and when I visited this village, I realized that that matzevot are everywhere. There are 3 such cowsheds built with matzevot. I found cowsheds in various places, in a bridge, somewhere under someone's barn, and so on. And I was talking to one old man who said that this cowshed was built in 1943. So it just took place in spring because Jews from Parysów were murdered in Treblinka in September 1943. So probably these farmers waited until spring for, let's say, higher temperature, and then they built this cowshed. In spite of various efforts, also our chief rabbi Michael Shudrich's efforts, in spite of involving the province authorities and a local priest, these 3 cowsheds still stand in Starowola. Of course, wood from grave markers, fences, building, and trees were used as fuel and building material. Graves were dug up in search of gold dental crowns and other valuables. It should be emphasized that devastation of Jewish cemeteries were not a new phenomenon. It also took place before the war. We know many such cases. But following outbreak of the Second World War, this practice intensified dramatically. The process of damaging cemeteries intensified after the Jews had been forced into the ghettos, and especially following their extermination in 1942. Now, let us talk about the destruction after the war, which actually my book, the majority of my book focuses on this destruction which took place after 1945. So the post-war communist Polish state, namely the government and its enterprises, was the second main factor after the local population responsible for the further destruction of Jewish cemeteries in Poland. But I must explain a little bit about the situation of Jewish organization in Poland after the war. In February 1945, the Minister of Public Administration issued a document which stated that the state does not allow to recreate Jewish communities, kehilot in Poland, and all the property of the pre-war Jewish communities will remain under the management of the state treasury. The Ministry of Public Administration permitted the creation of Jewish religious associations, which were not treated as legal successors of the pre-war Jewish communities. Moreover, in 1945 and 1946, the state regulated the legal status of real estate by issuing two decrees on abandoned property. The state treasury took possession of the property that, due to the war, was no longer in the possession of the owner or his legal successors. This decree provided the state treasury and local government associations the possibility of obtaining ownership title to unoccupied properties by a statute of limitations, so-called positive prescription, the acquisition of the right to immovable property due to its continuous and long-term use. And it could happen after a period of 10 years. As a consequence of the above documents, Jewish cemeteries formally became abandoned property. Jewish religious associations and later Jewish religious congregations could only be their users, not the owners, and in addition only in those towns where their headquarters were located. They were also deprived of the right to ownership of the property of pre-war Jewish communities, which could be sold or rented, and the profits could be set aside to cover, for example, maintaining to cover costs of maintaining cemeteries, of course, any other activity. As a result of introduction of these above-mentioned legal acts, the fate of Jewish cemeteries was dependent on the decisions of state authorities. Apart from several dozen cemeteries whose users were religious congregations, I mean Jewish congregations, 94% of cemeteries went as the so-called abandoned property to non-Jewish users. And from the very first months after the Eastern Front passed through Poland, the state administration units undertook various actions leading to the devastation of Jewish cemeteries. However, we should know that according to the officials, in Poland there was at least 6,000 so-called abandoned unused cemeteries, in most cases Protestant cemeteries. It was a result of a giant migration during and after the war, of course, genocide. Of course, I mean, this migration was caused by expelling all Germans from new western parts of Poland, as well as expelling many people from the southeastern part of the country. For the authorities, these cemeteries generated maintenance costs. They also disfigured the landscape and kept police forces busy in connection with theft and other criminal acts. So in 1958, in view of numerous protests sent by foreigners, mainly expelled Germans, the authorities began a program of tidying up cemeteries, which, however, due to the enormity of the task and increasing devastation, did not bring any spectacular results. The officials realized that a much easier solution is closing a cemetery and so-called using the cemetery for other purposes. Actually, according to the Polish cemetery law, the use of a cemetery for another purpose could not take place until 40 years after the last burial. However, the Act provided possibility of an earlier liquidation of a cemetery due to, I will quote, exceptional needs for reasons of public interest, defense of the state, or for the implementation of national economic plans. And by decisions of the local authorities, many cemeteries were converted into city parks and squares. Hundreds of various cemeteries, in most cases Protestant and Jewish cemeteries, were fully or partially obliterated by the construction of new buildings. Moreover, they were used for many other purposes, including sports fields, markets, and even a circus or a public toilet. As I said, cemetery buildings were also used for various purposes. They were used as apartments, cowsheds, warehouses, sometimes archives, and others. Several Jewish cemeteries were converted into municipal or military, for example, Soviet cemeteries. State authorities and its enterprises used cemeteries as a source of building material, which was legal to sell such massive lot. They sold gravestones, bricks, and other material and used them for their own needs. In the event of cemeteries being reused within 40 years since the last burial, the law required that they should be formally closed and exhumations should be carried out. However, these exhumations were a fiction. For example, in Opatów, in Yiddish Abt, from a cemetery which occupied a plot of more than 3 hectares, the remains of only 25 people were excavated and buried somewhere at the corner of the cemetery. And of course, as I said before, also the local population took part in the cemetery destruction after the war. From the very first months after the Soviet front passed through Poland, reports on destruction of cemeteries by Polish inhabitants began to pour into the Central Committee of Jews in Poland, including the theft of Macewot, the dismantling of walls, the plundering of graves, and the use of cemeteries as arable and pasture lands. Gravestones became a particularly desirable building construction material. It's also important to bear in mind the consequences of anti-Semitic attitudes of some members of the Polish society, or many members of the Polish society. One of the factors forcing survivors to leave the country or move from their family hometowns to large cities or the lands annexed from the Germany. We know that between July 1944, when the Soviet army entered Poland, and until 1946, at least 1,088 Jews lost their lives in Poland as a result of attacks, pogroms, and assassinations. Following the Kielce pogrom, during which over a period of several hours the crowd murdered over 40 people and injured about 40 more in the town center, over 70,000 Jews left Poland within just 3 months. And of course, many Poles also took an active part in the anti-Semitic campaign of 1967-1968. The waves of emigration caused by these events by this anti-Semitism resulted in Jewish graves being left unattended. If we assume that most of the approximately 1,200 Jewish cities in Poland were devastated by local populations, and that over the last 80 years, the destruction and profanation of each of them can be attributed to a varying degree to several dozen people, then without attempting precise statistic, the number of Poles involved in this practice should be estimated to be at least tens of thousands. Of course, the destruction of cemeteries aroused opposition from various Jewish organizations or, of course, individuals. Protests were sent to the authorities by the Social and Cultural Society of Jews in Poland, by the Jewish Religious Union, by the Jewish Historical Institute. And of course, many protests were sent by Jews living abroad. But the protests did have some influence on the behavior of officials in Poland. I will quote a letter issued by the local authorities in the town of Olsztyn in 1972. Special care should be taken with regard to decisions concerning the use of Jewish cemeteries for other purposes. It should be remembered that each and every use of a Jewish cemetery for a different purpose is regarded by hostile circles as a particularly malicious act of state policy towards followers of the Jewish religions. So it was this quote. But the situation changed at the beginning of the 70s. In 1974, the Office for Religious Affairs, which actually controlled all religious organizations in Poland, prepared a draft note concerning Jewish cemeteries, which stated, I will quote now, there is an urgent need to undertake actions that A, would make it impossible to unleash anti-Polish campaigns abroad by Jewish nationalist and Zionist circles. B, should eliminate economic reprisals against our country, which the above-mentioned Jewish forces are aiming for, especially in the USA. The matter of Jewish cemeteries in our country is to a great extent used in anti-Polish campaigns. Certain actions should therefore be undertaken that would indicate our goodwill and willingness to preserve particularly important cemeteries. In 1970, we know that from the beginning of the 70s, Polish authorities negotiated with various American rabbis. And in 1972, a group of rabbis from the USA visited Poland. They raised the issues of cemeteries during these meetings with the Polish government. The matter was also lobbied by representatives of the US Department of State and a group of senators. The results of these discussions was a note in which the Polish government declared its intention to preserve Jewish cemeteries. This decision was a part of the strategy of the communist state, which in the 70s was trying to get foreign loans for developing the country. However, it wasn't until the early 1980s when a noticeable, albeit by far inadequate change took place. At that time, the Communist Party dignitaries, aiming to convince international public opinion about the normalization of the situation in the country after martial law, made friendly gestures toward Jews in Poland. In August 1983, the International Commission for Jewish Cemeteries in Poland was created. The commission included representatives of the state and Jewish organizations, also American rabbis. In the following years, the state spent significant funds for basic cleaning works and fencing some cemeteries. In 1985, the authorities agreed to register the Nissenbaum Family Foundation, whose aim was to care for devastated cemeteries and synagogues. The above-mentioned operations nevertheless did not completely halt the destruction of cemeteries by the administration and state enterprises, although they certainly limited the process. And of course, the political transformation following the collapse of the People's Republic of Poland brought a significant change. In 1992, the Union of Jewish Communities in Poland was created, and another key item of legislation was the Act of State Relations with Jewish Communities, which came into force in 1997. Until this act, the Union of Jewish Communities in Poland became the legal successor of pre-war Jewish communities, thus gaining rights to the restoration of property, including cemeteries, providing that these were owned by the state treasury or local government entities. This excludes the possibility of recovering cemeteries, which after the war, as a result of various legal actions, had become the property of third parties. The state also adopted a few new acts which provide better conditions for protecting Jewish cemeteries. Some cemeteries are under care of local authorities, which periodically remove rubbish from the cemetery and cultivate vegetation. Despite the legal acts and guidelines described above, there are still cases of town and community council offices commissioning investments on cemetery lands. As I told before, the reborn, the recreated Jewish communities obtained the right of succession to the property of pre-war Jewish communities. This has enabled the communities to take possession of cemeteries and take care of them of the same independently, but at the same time imposes the obligation to maintain such sites in the proper conditions. Nowadays, 10 Jewish communities in Poland own approximately 130 cemeteries. The Foundation for the Protection of Jewish Heritage, in which we work, had become the owner of 153 cemeteries. 153. Today, the Jewish Communities Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage, as well as a few other organizations in Poland, try to restore more and more cemeteries. Numerous cemeteries have been restored, fenced off, and commemorated of the initiative of emigrants from Poland and their descendants. But restoring order to a devastated cemetery is a complex activity that usually involves regaining ownership of the cemetery, building a wall, the removal of many years of litter and vegetation, renovation of gravestones and structures, and of course requires periodic systematic cleaning and tending. Even in the case of just one cemetery, this means considerable costs and the necessity of involving a team of people. And I should emphasize that providing effective care of all cemeteries exceeds the capabilities of Jews living in Poland. According to the last national census, only just over 17,000 Polish citizens declare their Jewish national and ethnic identities. Approximately 10 of them are members of Jewish organizations. And this small group faces the challenge of taking care of burial places left over from a community with a 1,000-year history, and in 1939 numbering almost 3.5 million people. Of course, we cannot forget non-Jewish activists and organizations which take care about selected various cemeteries in Poland. Of course, as I said, this significant improvement in this respect was brought about by the democratization of life in Poland after 1989. Numerous cemeteries obtained non-Jewish guardians, both individuals and local social organizations and municipalities. However, many other cemeteries in Poland are completely without any care, used as parks, cultural centers, blocks of flats, often without any sign showing these are burial places. In spite of the above-mentioned efforts, I have to say that the Jewish cities in Poland still remain in a long shadow of the Shoah. There is still a lot to do. And I'm appealing to you, please help us maintain these burial places of Jews in Poland. Thank you very much.
Krzysztof, thank you for that powerful presentation. I'd now like to invite Piotr Pukta, the head of FODŻ, to take questions that have appeared in the chat or new questions in the chat for you. Piotr, you're on mute still?
Hello, Krzysztof. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes. So I took note of very interesting questions, and I would like to start with a question from Benzion Reichberg, who is asking if there is a law in Poland that is punishing Poles who are saying that Poles were helping Germans destroy the cemeteries. Can you comment on this?
This is difficult. Such a law was to be adopted a few years ago, but due to numerous protests, it was not adopted. But anyway, we must be careful. Of course, if we say so, we must have proofs, because someone, for example, may sue us to a court. Probably many of us know cases of Professor Jan Grabowski or Professor Barbara Engelking, our, let's say, historians, who were sued to the court in the past years by various right-wing organizations.
Thank you, Krzysztof. Also, I took note of two questions by Jörg Frankon from Buenos Aires, who is asking a specific question on Żuromin, and he would like to know if there is another cemetery in Żuromin except the one that is located at Żeromskiego Street.
As far as I know, this is the only cemetery in Żuromin, because this community was not, let's say, very old and not big. So there is only one cemetery. This cemetery is property of our foundation. Our foundation fenced this cemetery a few years ago, and now we are looking for funds to clean the cemetery, because this is very, very overgrown.
Thank you. And second question from Jörg Frankon from Buenos Aires. He's asking if there are Polish files of registration on Jewish burials from before World War II.
I suppose you mean cemetery registers. In most cases, these cemetery registers disappeared, perished during the war. I know only a few such registers from Lublin, from Gliwice, from Łódź, of course, and a few other towns. But most of them disappeared. Of course, they are vital records, which also include death certificates, but these documents do not mention when someone was buried. These cemetery registers were, of course, registers which included number of a plot, sometimes maps of the cemetery. But as I said, very few such registers survive. I have never heard about such a register from Żuromin.
One more question from Joel Rosenkrantz. He is asking a question concerning the position of the Catholic Church in Poland. Does the Catholic Church have an official position regarding Jewish cemeteries today?
Well, there were a few such appeals. The first one, as I know, the first one was issued in 1946 by our Bishop Stefan Wyszyński. Later, he was a Cardinal of Poland. After a meeting, probably with the Jewish Religious Union, he issued such an appeal to his, let's say, to members of the church in the Lublin province, asking them to stop destroying the Jewish cemeteries. Such an appeal was also published. I would have to check it. Probably it was the end of the 70s or rather 80s. And another such an appeal was published, was issued by the Polish Episcopate. I think it was 10 years ago, I think 2014. When the church appealed to Catholics in Poland to take care about Jewish cemeteries and other such places, I mean synagogues and other such places in Poland. But this appeal was not repeated.
Few more questions, Krzysztof. Deborah Kohn is asking, how does one learn which Polish organization owns the cemetery and which organization is restoring which cemeteries? For example, the Jedwabne cemetery, which remains partially hidden behind the memorial area.
The problem, the situation is very complicated because this law, which was adopted after the war, resulted in a big, let's say, legal mess. Today, the situation is very complicated. In many cases, the official owner of the cemetery is unknown. Many cemeteries belong to the state treasury, to the local municipalities. Some of them belong to private users. And as I said, in many cases, this owner is unknown. Approximately 300 cemeteries belong to the Kehilot, to Jewish communities, as well as to our foundation. The cemetery in Jedwabne is also our property. It was very overgrown. It was so overgrown that in summer it was impossible to enter the cemetery. But a few years ago, I think 3 or 4, FODŻ, in cooperation with the National Institute for Preservation of Cultural Heritage, cleaned the cemetery. All these trees or these scraps were cut down. Now there are only very young, not high trees in the cemetery. I was there last year on July 10th, of course, on the anniversary of the pogrom, and the cemetery looked. Of course, this is a destroyed cemetery with very few matzevot, but this cemetery was accessible. Recently, one man from Białystok, Kamil Mrozowicz, discovered that some matzevot were used in Jedwabne to build a wall which separate the Catholic cemetery from the First World War cemetery. So this is also a challenge to recover these broken tombstones to the cemetery in Jedwabne. I hope we will do that in future.
This time question from Ted Block. He's asking that his family is, his wife's family is from Nowogród and Łomża. And the question is, are there ways to get records of the names of interred in the cemetery from Łomża County records, for example?
Well, as I remember, the state archives in Łomża keep vital records from Nowogród. And these vital records also include death certificates. So such a list may be compiled on the base of these records. I suppose that according to the Polish law, the state archives in Łomża keep records which are older than 100 years. Records which are younger than 100 years should be kept in the town office in Nowogród. But due to protection of personal data, some of these records may not be available. So you should get in touch with the state archives in Łomża, as well as with the Urząd Miasta, with the municipality in Nowogród, to check what is available.
Jörg Frankon is following on his questions concerning Żuromin Cemetery, and he is asking if you know what happened to the remains from people buried in Żuromin. Do you have any specific information on this?
No, I don't know anything more. Actually, I have a friend there. I know how a cemetery looks, but I don't know too much about. I'm just looking at your questions. Well, I suppose these people still remain there. Of course, there may be some, let's say, works. Maybe some people wanted to plunder the graves, but I think in spite of destroying all matzevot, I'm pretty sure that majority of burials of people buried there, they are still there.
Now I would like to refer to the question by Peter Blair, who believes that there was another cemetery in Przeloś next to synagogue, now the marketplace lot. And someone looked into it in 2017. The new cemetery was created in early 1800s. Jews were living there at least as early as 1784. So, do you know anything about the one that was destroyed?
I must check it, but please remember that not every Jewish community had its own cemetery. In the past, it was very common to transfer the dead even to the distant towns. For example, for many years, people living in the Podlasie region, they buried their dead in Tykocin, which was even 70 or 60 kilometers far away. So I think the same situation took place in this part of Poland. I would have to analyze the situation, but I think Probably one of these towns had an older cemetery which was used by neighboring communities. For example, in Jeleniewo, which is a little bit north of Suwałki, there is a cemetery where we found a macewa from the end of the 18th century. But of course, it may happen that there was another cemetery, I mean an older cemetery, which was used in the past, and it was, for example, closed at the beginning of the 19th century, and people forgot it. A very, let's say, good example is a cemetery in Pustelnik, in Marki, which is now a suburb of Warsaw, or a town neighboring Warsaw. We know that a cemetery in Pustelnik was created probably in 1930s, so just before the war. There are some testimonies of, let's say, older residents of this town. They remember Jewish funerals, but nobody knows exactly where the cemetery is. So in a case of cemeteries which were, for example, established 200 years and more ago, it may be, of course, that such a cemetery existed, and today nobody remembers. There is a great book written by Tomasz Wiśniewski, my good friend and a great researcher of Jewish cemeteries. He started researching these cemeteries in the 80s, and in this time he was able to find cemetery, let's say the oldest cemeteries, which were, for example, used as courtyards. And there were some remnants of these cemeteries in the 80s, but nowadays there is nothing. So maybe the same was in the case of Przerość, but of course, as I said before, it's very likely that these first Jewish settlers used another cemetery in another town.
Krzysztof, I see that there are more and more questions coming. However, our time is coming to a close. So I believe we will need in the future to organize another session for question and answer. But before we close, I would like to put one last but not least question. If from Myrna Tech, if you know if there are cemetery records from Gonion Cemetery.
No, I don't know such records, unfortunately.
Okay, I believe that the rest of the questions we will be able to answer during one of our coming sessions or by exchange of emails. So thank you again, Krzysztof, for your very thorough presentation, and I'm giving floor now to Dan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Krzysztof. Again, a very powerful, important presentation. For those of you who want to read Krzysztof's book, you see Krzysztof has encyclopedic knowledge. It is documented thoroughly in his newly translated into English book published by Academic Studies Press. You can go online, Google Academic Studies Press, Krzysztof Bielawski. It's available through that publisher in ebook format and paperback, both of which are very affordable, or as a hardcover. You can also obtain the paperback and hardcover through Amazon. I'd like to announce to everybody in 2 weeks from now, at this exact same time period, we have an upcoming Friends of Jewish Heritage in Poland, Foundation for Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland co-sponsored webinar being presented by Bill Brostoff, who is president of FJHP's affiliate group, Friends of Jewish Cemeteries in Poland. Bill has written and edited and led the writing of a very valuable, powerful, detailed descendants guide to restoring your ancestor cemetery in Poland. For those of you who want to get personally and deeply involved with leading cemetery restoration work at your ancestral place. This will be in 2 weeks. You can register through the same way that you registered through this. We'll send out information on the FODŻ Facebook group, the Friends of Jewish Heritage in Poland Facebook group, and by email. Finally, as we said, Krzysztof made the point that doing good work takes time, energy, and effort. It's very easy to think in this work that this is a problem and somebody needs to take care of it. The reality is that the challenge of our world is that somebody needs to be you, and we call upon each of you to help in any way you can. For some people, it's by financial donation. For other people, it's by becoming personally involved with the work. On this slide, we have a QR code and the website for FODŻ, and as well as the QR code and a website to donate through Jewish Heritage Poland. Either way, through our 501c3 in the US or through Poland, either way that you support this work, it will help to make for a better future. Once again, I thank each of you for being here, and Krzysztof for your amazing presentation, and Piotr and Krzysztof for the opportunity to share this afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.